All right, let's continue our focus on emerging market economies, many of them being battered. Nigeria and Venezuela are struggling because of low oil prices. South Africa and Brazil are in recession. Trade wars with the U.S. also are not helping these economies. But is there hope to turn things around? Our reporter, Michael Appel, is in Rio in Brazil for us tonight. Michael, we know that the key thing on many Brazilians' mind is that around elections, and of course, they're going to be going into the elections next week. And today, a court there making a ruling that could affect how voting takes place. Tell us about the Supreme Court judgment.
Yes, Kathy, there was a significant judgment that came out of the Supreme Court recently that signals a blow to the PT or Workers' Party here that is contesting and is trailing the leading candidate, who's a far-right nationalist from the Social Liberal Party, Jair Bolsonaro, that if you haven't registered for biometric verification, then you are ineligible. You are not allowed to vote in this upcoming election. You can imagine it's an absolute logistical nightmare if you've got 150 registered voters in this country. So everything is done electronically, and there was a recent ruling that you had to go and get registered with your thumbprint, with your fingerprints. If you haven't bothered to do that, it's way too late now. The Supreme Court saying that 3.4 million Brazilians will not be allowed to vote. Those 3.4 million Brazilians come primarily from the northeast of the country, which is seen as a stronghold of the Workers' Party. So that just signals a further blow to that constituency. The election taking place next week, Sunday, things hotting up. The headlines here are full of stories about corruption, about the various candidates, what they have to say. Tomorrow is a massive protest march against the leading candidate at the moment. It's called the hashtag #EleNão, which means not him, as in not Bolsonaro. They're expecting a lot of women, a lot of NGOs to come out in support against the candidate at the moment.
You know, you speak about what the headlines are going with, and I wonder whether the media there has been polarized in terms of how it's covering this upcoming elections, and what do people feel about how the various candidates have been portrayed in the media, especially given the fact that their policies and outlook is so different?
Yeah, I spoke to a veteran journalist yesterday, Silvio Barsetti, and he's worked in a lot of the big newspapers in this country, and he said that there's no ways to sort of spell this out differently, but the media is partisan in this country. The media owners control the line, and if you're a journalist who wants to keep his or her job at a newspaper, then you toe the line. So there is a bit of cynicism around how the media reports things here. Traditionally, the media has lent to the right. That's slightly changed now, and you have both sides. The left, the Workers' Party, saying that the media has been bought out by the right. And then if you speak to the right, they say, oh, media has been bought out by the left. So there isn't really a good middle ground here. And if you go to social media, Instagram is massive in this country. People consume their news by Instagram. And if you go on, it's very difficult to be able to discern what is real from fake news. And that's a problem in Brazil, as it is in any other country at the moment. But the media struggling to be seen as objective at this moment. And of course, with such a divisive but yet such an incredibly important election coming up, what the media are saying, they have been accused in the past of manipulating the predictions in the polls ahead of elections. Not a massive amount of trust in the media here, unfortunately.
All right, and of course, the issue of media reportage can also be just an issue of subjectivity, really, depending on which group you're speaking to, especially if it's as polarized as you're saying. But in terms of just freedom of expression, because the two are, of course, mutually exclusive, right? So your experience as a reporter in Brazil, but the experience that I think many of the reporters there would have had just reporting on the election, is media allowed to do their jobs?
Yes, certainly. It's been an absolute pleasure to work here. We've walked around with cameras throughout most of the country, and there's never been an issue. Law enforcement's never stopped us and asked us what we're doing here. You may not film here, you may not film there. Interestingly, the only place we haven't been allowed to film was in a public space in the favelas, because the favelas are basically run by the cartels. So yesterday, when we were coming out of a cartel, out of a favela, we were told, you do not shoot here, you keep your camera down. There's obviously a lot of apprehension around having the media in a favela. It's kind of an unwritten rule there that you just don't bring your cameras out. I did post on social media that the cartels have their spotters in and around the favela, and they have walkie-talkie system. So as we came past, the guys walking into their walkies to say, well, we have journalists here, we have a camera here. All of a sudden, the guy that Anderson saw from an NGO who was taking us through got very nervous and said, listen guys, if you want to shoot a link, you have to do it really quickly. I don't think I've ever shot a link that quickly in my life. So when he gets nervous, when the person taking you around, yeah, you get pretty nervous yourself. But it's been an incredible experience, Kathy.
That's absolutely fantastic, Michael. As long as you made it out safe, that's what matters the most. Michael Appel, not Michael Murillo, Michael Appel is out in Rio, and he's been looking at the Brazilian economy. This is over the past week. We'll continue our focus on emerging markets.